Hello and welcome to The Culture, the world's first esoteric festival. This is our channel. It's great to see you here, and it's recorded in the Marrakesh studio. So we say in Moroccan, Jajuka, something good comes to you. A lot of the Scottish myths connected with stones are also entwined with fairy lore. The fairy hill of Rannoch Moor near Perth. It's Rannoch Moor is on the eastern side, and it's inhabited by fairies who are able to grant wishes or cure people of malignant illness and things. It was ceremoniously visited by local inhabitants on May Day. When people came there, they brought with them flowers and garlands as offerings to the fae folk, and a ritual around a well was conducted. So again, the stones have this embryonic link back into Neolithic times. Stone of Scone is perhaps the most famous stone legend, not just of Scotland but England. It is a large block of sandstone that was historically used in the coronation of the monarchs of Scotland and was kept at the now ruined Scone Abbey in Scone, near Perth, Scotland. There is a roughly incised cross on one side and two iron rings at the ends for easier transport. It weighs about 150 kilos or 330 pounds. The Stone of Scone has also been called the Stone of Destiny, and that's because kingship in the Celtic was bestowed on anyone who sat over the stone. So if a king was invested, their coronation throne would have the Stone of Destiny under it, or they would stand upon it and declare themselves king. And the English actually built a coronation chair, which Queen Elizabeth, I believed, was the last person to have this underneath her. I don't know if King Charles will have that when he's invested as king, but it figured in a big way in the Celtic myths. And so the Stone of Destiny was finally associated with the kingship and rulership. The Scottish wanted it back, and in 1969 a group of students set out to do just that. So on Christmas Day 1950, 4 Scottish students secreted themselves inside Westminster Abbey, and they took away the Stone of Scone and they returned it back to Scotland. Now, why is this so significant, you may ask? Well, every Scottish king had used the stone in their investiture in order to take power of the Celtic kingdom, and that gave them investiture as king, as the ruler. The Scottish took the stone. They also used it in the same manner. If you didn't stand upon it, you weren't really the ruler. You had to stand on the Stone of Scone. The English under Edward took it away, and they built a coronation throne, and underneath it was the Scone stone, the Stone of Destiny. Every single king ever since, or queen, has had this underneath them at the coronation. The last monarch was Queen Elizabeth I. It remains to be seen whether Charles, in his up-and-coming coronation, will actually have the stone returned from Scotland to be put in Westminster Abbey under his throne at the time of his crowning. So we'll wait and see if that happens. This, of course, the theft threw into relief the actual, not just the mythos of the stone and why it was important to the British monarchs and everything else, but because they were Scottish nationalists, the Stone of Destiny, it was a liberation, not a theft in their eyes. It also brought into relief, devolution, all these arguments about the Celtic people having greater say in Parliament and perhaps even being independent. So taking the stone back, it was actually not seen as a theft by many, but actually a symbol of Scottish nationhood. And you could say that the arguments for devolution really came from 1969, from that act, strangely enough. And of course today we see a greater movement for Scottish independence and arguments around that, and people wanting to campaign for that and even vote on it in a national referendum. So we'll see if that happens. But it's all about national identity, and the Stone of Scone is so important, and it's unbelievable that this stone could have such an effect on all of those political matters. When we're talking about the Stone of Scone, we're really talking about coronation, inauguration, and bestowing powers on a person. But why? And people have suggested that the original Scots kings were crowned in the west of Scotland in a place called Argyll. Kenneth I is one of the names that's mentioned, who united the Scots and the Pictish kingdoms, the ancient kingdoms, and moved his capital to Scone in the west of Scotland, around, I think it's the Perth area. The Stone of Destiny was moved there too, and so therefore all the future kings that came along would then be inaugurated inside Scone in Perthshire. Now, the question is this an old Neolithic stone which is ornately carved, or is it just a block of red sandstone? We certainly know from records that the stone does actually belong to the Scone area. There's a quarry near there, and it's identical sandstone, so there's no question that it did come from biblical lands, as some people suggested, or Spain, or Malta, or Sicily. None of that's actually relevant. It is a Scottish stone. It actually belongs to the geology of the area. Now, discounting these biblical and Egyptian legends for a minute, was this a megalithic stone which was then revered so much that it passed on to future generations? And we can't really say that. We don't know. But it was in this other place and moved to Scone, and of course then it was ransacked by Edward I, who brought it to London, put it underneath the coronation chair, and subsequently, 1996, the English, under pressure, have returned it back, where it's now resting in a really ancient place, which is the Edinburgh Castle, which is a Neolithic site. It's actually a stone site in its own right, but it's invested there. I think Nicola Sturgeon wanted to move it to the Abbey, the original Abbey of Scone again, and it's all these twists and turns with the destiny of the stone, and it's all interlinked with Scottish nationalism and people who want to see it as the symbol of their nationhood. Sir Walter Scott wrote about the stone, and he said, "Unless the fates be faulty grown, and prophet's voice be vain, wherever is found the sacred stone, the Scottish race shall reign." And this prophecy about the stone was later fulfilled because King James VI, I think it was, of Scotland, succeeded Elizabeth I, and he was the first Scotsman and King of Great Britain, in fact. So the prophecy was fulfilled. The stone again. Some people have suggested since about the stone that it's not actually the original, and it's all a con, and the original stone of the old Celts has long gone, and this substitute at some point. Of course, we'll never know. This rumour persists. I mean, there's two camps to that. We'll never know. The original, though, has been kept for safekeeping by the Scottish nationalists, so it might even reappear. The Irish Celts had their own Stone of Destiny, which was called Lia Foil. It's spelt F-A-I-L, but I think it's pronounced foil. It is intrinsically linked with Irish kingship. It's a coronation stone for the King of Tara and the High King of Ireland. And so this Stone of Destiny was also known as the Speaking Stone, because when people who were invested with kingship went to the stone, it would sometimes let out a shriek or a sound, and this was believed to have rejuvenating powers of not just for the king, but for the land as well. And so this word foil has an obscure meaning now, but it's believed to have something to do with the Irish state, the island of Foyle, the ancient name for Ireland. So this stone also has this mythos which underpins kingship. As the last little piece of this, I just want to say the Isle of Man, being a Celtic Manx island, also has its own Stone of Destiny, the oldest parliament in the world. So they also have their own mythos, but we won't cover that off now. I just want to say that the Scottish stone, the Stone of Destiny there, the Stone of Scone, it actually has a fairy link to it, and that's why we started this little piece about fairies, is that one of the legends connected with it is the fairy gives the king a gateway to the other world, the fairy world, and there's a wedding feast and all sorts connected with this. So is King Charles going to sit upon this? And if he is, does that mean he has the powers invested in him of the fairy kingdom and a magical link? So it's the biggest magical ceremony we've had in this country for many years, and I'm guessing a lot of people, millions of people, will be watching it. But I wonder if they know all this, and wonder whether they know King Charles may be the latest fairy king. Thanks for joining Occulture. Hope to see you again, but don't forget, hit the subscribe button. We'll see you soon. All the best.